the evolution of sustainable seafood, that's as far as how I'm concerned, or how it's evolved with me. So this is a picture of, well, the chef of sea, but our sablefish fisherman, Mr. Joy, and he is a joy. Sablefish was in 1998. Sablefish was the first seafood that we actively sought out as a sustainable source, and it was to remove Chilean sea bass off our menu. At the time, sustainable seafood wasn't a term. No one was really talking too much about what was going on. So we were just looking not so much for something sustainable, but we were looking for something that we felt was properly harvested. And the only way we could do that is to look for things that were local, and sablefish was a local product. And it started us down a path, not intentionally, but it started me down the path of sourcing total sustainable seafood as far as our menu was concerned. It was the first little step that people were starting to ask us why we did it, and we didn't realize we were even affecting what people thought, or people were even paying attention to what we were doing. Essentially, our only hope was the only thing we hoped out of this was that people asked the simple question, where does your food come from? And it was important for us to know where our food came from, and that's why we started to source sablefish. Our most challenging obstacle, and what I would consider one of our biggest success, is with wild Pacific salmon. It was very hard for us to source wild Pacific salmon from a resource where we knew exactly where it was coming from. And we got our break with this couple, Fred and Linda Hawkshot of Prince Rupert. And the brilliance of this story is not only at this point could I know the river that the fish had come from. I knew it was Skeena River Sockeye or Nass River Spring or whatever, because I knew I had developed a relationship with the fishermen. But they had done something beautiful. They were gill netters, and for anybody that is aware of how seafood is harvested, gill netting doesn't produce the highest quality fish. It's probably, of the three gear types that are used, it probably produces the least desirable quality as far as a chef's concerned. But with 3 small modifications to their gill net, it went from probably the most undesirable fish to the most sustainably, the highest quality salmon produced in British Columbia. And they only made 3 small modifications. They shortened the length of their net by half. They made the holes in the net mesh smaller so that the fish's head actually wouldn't go into the net, because essentially a fish head goes in, it wraps around the gills, and it essentially drowns or suffocates. So the fish's head couldn't go in the net, so they were only catching fish from the little hook on their mouths, on the salmon's mouths. And the third thing was they only left it in the water. Maximum they ever left it in was 17 minutes from the second the cork went in until that cork came back out. So it didn't, fish, even if they got tangled in the net, didn't have time to die. And essentially what they did was, that's Linda taking out and putting it in their revival tanks, or in their tanks. They would keep the fish alive on board. And what that does is essentially it allows the lactic acid from the fish struggling to decrease, and then they would bring it back to shore and they would kill it, and that would give us the highest quality fish. This is my favorite. This is a little pink salmon. This is Frankie. He's I didn't want to put his head in the frame because he thinks he's good looking. But this is a pink salmon. One of the most well, it's the least desirable salmon as far as people that consume wild BC salmon. It's one of my favorite, and every second year there's more pink salmon than you can know what to do with. They stopped fishing them this year because it's a big year, and we should consume it more. I've been preaching this for 12 years, and up until about 4 years ago, about 4 years ago, you still couldn't get really good quality pink because no one really was interested in consuming it. This here is a friend of mine, Mr. Steve Johansson. And this is what he harvests, is BC spot prawns. Spot prawn was the final big one because the majority of it went to Japan, and nobody was really interested in selling us a local high quality product, and what was available wasn't very good. So it was hard for me to get chefs interested in the spot prawn, which is much more sustainable option than farm tiger prawns. But we managed with the Chef's Table Society to start the spot prawn, the annual spot prawn festival. And now they line up all over the place. This isn't a picture. I'm way out of line here, but anyway, they line up for them. We'll get to it later. After the spot prawn thing, so basically the menu at sea had come to a point where everything was sustainable. Sea urchin's the last little thing we're working on now at sea. Well, this year, this is what we're working on, sea urchin. They just introduced a day boat fishery in Steveston. So the boat comes in on a Friday. They harvest the sea urchins on Thursday. And on Friday, you can get them fresh down at Steveston Wharf, which is a first-time initiative. So we're working with the guys. That's that's the chef from Sea, messing around, and the president of the Underwater Divers Association. Community participation is the next step, or has been the next step for us for a while. This is the Spot Prawn Festival. So everybody's hanging around. 4 years ago, you couldn't find a decent spot prawn, and now last year we had 800 people show up at the Spot Prawn Festival. There's a real community drive to source out sustainable products, and that is what's important. Is demand drives what goes on in the industry. We go to schools and educate. This is the Growing Chefs program, where we go into schools and educate children on what real food is, and we believe that the children are the future, and they need to be taught what sustainability is all about. The Spot Prawn Festival has been so exceptionally successful, it's now moved and it's growing. So this was the first annual Spot Prawn Festival in Cowichan Bay. What we did here was, working with the Pacific Salmon Foundation, we helped cook and serve 2,000 pounds of pink salmon this summer in August down at Vanier Park near the Maritime Museums. And everybody down there, most of them had never tasted pink salmon before, and it was kind of like, well, why would I eat pink salmon? And after they tasted, they got a better appreciation for one of the 5 species that we have that we should actually take a look at as a sustainable food source. This is just the art of seafood, so that's like a spot prawn. And mussels, we have wonderful mussels, Dungeness crab, salmon, pink salmon, halibut, albacore tuna, oysters. We have wonderful oysters. That's the farm coho I was referring to. Sardines. We're just starting to eat sardines again, which is great. Crab cakes. This was taken here at the aquarium. This is jellyfish, and we don't. So now, part of it is trying to get people to eat things that there's a lot of, and there's a lot of jellyfish out there. So we take that and we turn it into that. So there's little jellyfish. I don't know, my little pointer, like that's the jellyfish along there. It's tasty. See, again, this year we're pushing sea urchins. We turned into this and we turned into that. And scallops. These are, if you can see, actually I guess it's a pretty big picture up there, but that's like the beginning of scallops. Pretty well the only sustainable scallops produced in North America come from BC. The future is the young chef. So my role, and we all have a role to play as far as helping preserve the oceans. My role is to educate the future chefs, and what's interesting, those 4 young cooks coming out of sea are now 4 chefs in their own places, and they now where their chefs, the restaurants they work for, now purchase sustainably harvested seafood, and that's part of how it can grow. Half of my success is the fact that I stood on the shoulders of these 2 men. They're on your left is Michael Stadlander, and on your right is Jamie Kennedy. And they live in southern Ontario, but they've been very instrumental in opening my eyes to the proper philosophy. And they've got a lot of exciting initiatives going on. Michael Stadlander's new initiative is what they're calling the Canadian Chefs Congress, and this is at his farm in 2008. Up until about 2004, 2005, everything I accomplished, or we accomplished, we were accomplishing internally in the restaurant. Our biggest obstacle was that people would disregard sustainably harvested seafood as something that only high-end white tablecloth restaurants could afford. And then, fortunately enough, the Vancouver Aquarium started the OceanWise program, and it single-handedly, like within a year, accomplished more than we had in the previous 7. The work that the Vancouver Aquarium did has been fundamental in moving sustainably harvested seafood, and the need and the desire and the demand for sustainably harvested seafood in this country moved it forward. And with your dollar and with your decisions, you affect change, and change will save our ocean.